Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Women Leading Powerfully Through Change Summit. My name is Kathy Murphy. I am the host. And wait until you hear about the incredible woman that I have today, who's going to be giving you her genius on leading powerfully through change. And Natalie Lincolne is the owner of Incredible People, founder and owner. So of course she would be an incredible human if she's created that kind of a company. And she is a strategic leadership and performance coach. So Natalie, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us and being willing to spend your time sharing and helping all the leaders out there in the world today.
Oh, thank you, Kathy. It's my pleasure. And hello from sunny Perth in Australia, one of the most isolated cities in the world, but beautiful if you ever come here.
Yeah, I bet. And you're having summer right now.
We are. It's quite warm over here.
Okay. So it is very appealing to a lot of people watching this. And a lot of you, I hope, are coming from Australia and looking at this. So we have people all over the world joining in to see beautiful Australia here through Natalie's eyes.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Oops. Tell us a little bit about, you work with a lot of people and you've experienced things yourself. What are some of the significant changes you have gone through, you have helped lead people through and help them lead their teams through? And how have these turned out? How did they impact everybody? What was the result?
Yeah, that's a very big question, actually, Kathy. So as a leader myself, I've led a number of changes in my own team and for the organisation. I've also been an organisational change manager within an organisation. And of course, now as an external coach and consultant, I'm working with lots of different organisations across government, business and non-profit to implement change. So I've seen change from all sorts of different angles. What sorts of change? Well, often it's technology, upgrading systems or introducing new technology. It has a considerable impact. And of course, as the world is getting faster and there's more AI and more tech, I think that's going to be an ongoing pressure for leaders and businesses and organisations to consider. But there's also downsizing or right-sizing or service model reviews. We want to do things a different way, which means looking at our organisation, how we deliver our services, how we structure our people. All of those things are considerable changes that I've been involved in. And what was the outcome? I think that was one of the part of the question. I think outcomes are mixed. Change is really hard to do well, I think, and there are steps along the way and there's lots of theory, and you can do change management courses that will give you all the best ideas. But being flexible and adaptive as you're going through change and responding to what you have to respond to, plans that don't go as intended, people that don't want to engage, your clients or customers that don't respond as you expect. You need to change your plan along the way, and that can be hard as well, especially when everyone's change fatigued. They've put all their effort into making it work and it's not working, and then you have to muscle up the strength to do more change. It can be really exhausting.
Wow. What would you say? Let's take one of those areas, like the organizational structures changing.
Mm-hmm.
What do you notice a lot of resistance in the leader that you're working with, the team? Like where does resistance come in on those things?
Yeah, well, I think for the leader, it depends whether the change is imposed on them or whether it's their initiative. I mean, if the organisation has said, right, we're cutting down staff, you have to find some savings, go for it. That's a really, really tough situation for a leader to be in. You might not believe in the change. You're not sure how you're going to survive with less people. You've got to cut people out that, you've invested in and you've grown to love. That is, a really tough situation. If it's something that you're initiating, like it's you wanting to change how your business operates, or you're introducing a new service or product, it's going to, be an exciting change, then it feels very different. So I think from those two, the leaders respond differently and might have different levels of resistance. For staff, for structural change, it's often a really scary thing. You know, we all know that there's different responses. People, some people are early adopters. They love change. They're in a great place personally. They're excited. They can buy into the vision and they're off. You know, they're your early adopters and you get them on board to help you to bring the change to life. But there's always the laggers as well, those the most resistance that kicking and screaming don't want to be a part of this. And it's not because they're being difficult as people quite often, although I know sometimes that is the case. It's often because they're scared, they're worried about something, maybe in their personal life, they're not very stable at the moment. They've got other big stresses. You know, they might be about to get married or build a house, those things you know about quite often, but there's other stresses that are in their personal life that they might not be telling you about, you know, a teenager who's struggling or parents who are aging or even a you know, health diagnosis of their own that they might not be willing to share. Those things can make people feel very vulnerable when change hits, and they will often be the ones that are resisting until they can buy into the vision themselves. And eventually they usually do.
Okay. What would you say, like, what is the best thing for a leader to do? I know I was in that position a lot, that things came down because I was working for a government agency. Things come down and you're like, really? Like, who does that? That makes no sense at all. But you have to implement it. Some of those things you can't really fight. I mean, you can try, you can go and you can have a conversation with the people who are decision making. But then if you can't do anything, you have to kind of bring that down to the team in a way that you can get their buy-in, but yet you're not 100% bought in yourself. What would you say to those people when they're in that situation?
Well, I'm a real realist, I'm going to tell you. So my first thing would be to say to you as a leader, are you in for this? Like, do you want to? It might have been, Kathy, you know, you've experienced it, but it might have been the 6th time over the last 10 years that you've had to implement a change that you don't believe in and you're done. And in that case, I think you need to recognize that you're an adult with 2 feet and a heartbeat, and you can make some choices, and perhaps moving now is a good time. You can put your energies and passion into something, into an environment, you know, where you can springboard into something and find your mojo again. So I think it's a good time, if you really don't agree with it, to think, do I want to be a part of this really? Or am I just doing it because I've been here forever and I'm worried about moving? So I think a lot of people who do make that choice, it's like, okay, it's time for me to look for some new endeavors. In hindsight, they look back and think, why did it take me so long to move? But you know, if you've decided that, okay, I am going to stay, then that decision in itself is a mindset shift, right? You go, okay, I've thought about leaving, but I've decided to stay because. And so identify those reasons. I think, what is it about staying what is it about the organisation or the change or the situation that makes you want to stay, and really tap into that and be, you know, very clear on that in your mind, because that becomes the strength to then engage in the change more positively. You've got to find something. I mean, how can your strengths add value? How can you influence that change? Bearing in mind, as you say, sometimes your influence is limited, but how can you influence, or how can you use your unique strengths and skills to adapt? But then once you've decided to stay, I think you do need to buy in, and getting a really clear vision of how it can look is, I think, the fundamental thing to you understanding and getting excited about what the future can look like, but also getting your team on board. You know, if you can't come out and tell them what the world's going to look like afterwards and what the positives are, and also maybe what some of the challenges will be along the way, and how proud they can feel about overcoming those challenges and delivering on it, and the professional development and, you know, and camaraderie that's going to come from that, then how can you expect your team to engage? You know, you need a clear vision. And that's not always easy to do, and especially if it's being imposed on you and you're not 100%, you know, committed. Because in your mind, there's this resistance, you know, okay, I've got to do this, but I'm just still not 100% bought in. So my advice in that situation would really be to get a mentor or a coach or someone from your industry sector who you can catch up with and brainstorm with, and get them to help you push through and get a really clear vision and test it, road test it a bit to get some clarity so that you can go and talk to other people about it. And look, if you come up with some issues, then you've got some really founded facts that you can push upline if you want to see if you can influence change. But as you know, we're senior leaders here. I just don't think this will work. That's not going to cut it. They're just going to dismiss whatever you're going to say. So you need to come back to them with something that's been thought out, with some facts and figures behind it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And I like that you talk about the vision, because often, and especially right now in today's world, like, we really don't know exactly what the outcome is going to look like after. Like even in a reorganization, you don't know exactly what it's going to look like. But what I always found is if I could just get curious about, okay, I would tell people, like, this is happening. Given that it's happening, regardless of where we are right now, what can we look ahead to and how can we make this work? And getting them to buy into the fact that we are moving ahead and we're going to look for something. We don't know exactly what it's going to end up like, but how can we keep it in a positive way, and like what potential might be there when we change it. So I tried to vision it, that help people imagine something that might be possible without really knowing if it was or not. But what I found was giving them something to grasp onto that could have a positive outcome was really helpful at those times. And it was helpful for me in bringing it down to really quickly go from, this is never going to work. Because if I had gone ahead with that, I would have found evidence of why it wasn't going to work. And it may have been coming from a very judgmental mind that I wasn't open to what was ahead. So I try to always just get curious and go, well, what might come out of this, like that we haven't even thought of yet?
Yeah, I love that you talk about curiosity, Kathy, because to me, that is how people engage in change. It's the fixed mindset of this isn't going to work, or we've done this before, which you hear a lot in government, particularly 10 years ago. And so it's that fixed mindset that is resistance, and getting people into curiosity stage, or somehow giving them little pieces of the puzzle, or asking them to explore little pieces of the puzzle. How could we write a checklist that would help deliver this? Or, how could we talk to our customers about this change? What concerns do you think they might have? Tapping into their expertise, but slowly but surely engaging them in where you're trying to get them with the mindset is really important. So that curiosity is really important. But the other thing you said about vision, absolutely, it's the carrot, right? It's what motivates you towards a fuzzy future, and it's not always really clear. But the other thing is that along the way, as you know, when you implement change, things don't go as you plan most of the time. In fact, I don't think I've ever been in a change process that has gone exactly as we've planned, because we can't, our crystal ball's just, I don't know, mine's not working. I don't know about yours. And so I think it's also a really great way to have it as a guidepost. So not just a vision, but also I encourage leaders to develop some success measures. Like, how will we know if we've done this well?
Yeah. And
so here's what the future might look like. And how will we know if we've done it well? So what are the success measures? And sometimes it's money, but money isn't necessarily, money might motivate your senior leaders, financial savings or increased profit, but it might not motivate you and your team. But, service delivery outcomes, customer satisfaction, efficiency, less waste, improved engagement, those sorts of things. How can you measure those and then look at them and see, are we on track with our change? So as those things go wrong, your vision is your guidepost, I guess, to keep looking at and saying, all right, should we go this way or this way? And it should help you to define which way is going to keep you moving forward and not 5 degrees left of centre. But also, as I said, those success measures, checking in on those and saying, okay, are we going in the right direction? What's going wrong? And replanning from there. I think that's a really good way of staying flexible and a bit agile in change, which does need to be planned out, but very, very rarely goes exactly as you plan.
Right. Well, I think planning is important. However, being willing to look at, like you said, the endpoint, the target, and know that just like with our GPS, it's going to reroute sometimes, and that it's not a failure. It's not a, wow, we shouldn't have gone this way. It's a, well, that didn't work. We just looked at the customer satisfaction. It didn't go up at all. Like, no, that wasn't the way. Let's try something else. So
that's right. Yeah.
just that.
And so I think, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, I think it's that consultation and talking to your customers, talking to your staff all the time and recalibrating as you go. That's a really important part of change. Exactly as you say. I love the GPS analogy, although my GPS doesn't, sometimes it takes me down paths. I wonder where it gets where's the algorithm come from? But I suppose some people feel like that in change too, right?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, same kind of thing. It's like, oh, it came from up there. Okay, that's where it's coming from. Change came from the top of the bureaucracy. But do you notice, like, when people are in it, you're talking about engagement and measuring engagement. And I know that like 76% of the people in the workforce right now are disengaged, which is really hurting our results and our success in a way, because they're not using their creativity or anything when they're not there mentally. When you're talking about measuring engagement as a result of a change, would you measure that with customers and with like the team who's working?
Yeah, absolutely. I use Pulse Text quite often. I don't know if you've heard of those, but I usually use something like an online tool like SurveyMonkey, and you design, 3 to 5 questions that are really targeted to see how people are feeling about the change, whether they understand why we're doing this, whether they are applying it well in their job. And so it's just a few very quick questions. It's designed to take a minute or two maximum. And usually I like to measure that about every 2 to 3 weeks. It depends on the change, but I'll do it beforehand. So after the change is announced, the big town hall, here's what we're doing, why we're doing it. So you get your baseline then, and then it's a really great way to not only find out who your early adopters are, and your laggers, but find out what information your team really needs to engage, because quite often it's just a lack of information or understanding. And that understanding can take quite a while to develop, especially if you're introducing a new service delivery model. I'm thinking about a client I worked with very recently. We totally transformed how they structure their teams and how they will operate as a result. So it's not just the structure that they're going to be reporting differently, but how they operate was shifting totally on its head. And it meant rethinking the processes, rethinking, the technology that they'll be using. Just about everything was going to be rethought. So major change. And there were some people who just couldn't see why we were doing that, couldn't see how it would look in the future. And that's totally understandable with such a huge amount of change. So all you can do is keep engaging them. So keep checking in what they need, running workshops, brainstorming, getting them involved, letting them ask their questions, as uncomfortable as they can be, especially when you don't always have the answers, but taking it away and saying, okay, that's a good point. Let me go and think about that, and I'll come back to you and maybe get some more input from you and see what you think. Right. So I think really engaging with your team is the key thing. Customers later, once you've implemented the change, early on, you need to hear what I think it's important to hear what they think might happen. But again, they only know what they know now, and they often can't, feel uncomfortable about change too. So they may not be as constructive in the early stages, but informing you of what they love and don't want to lose is really important.
Yeah. So with the teams, communication, like open communication all the time is really key for getting people through that.
Yeah, look, I think one of the key things that a leader can do through change, or right from when it's announced right through to the end, is communicate. I mean, it's change management 101. Everyone's heard it, but you can't over communicate in change. I think, we tend to think we've said it. We told them. I told them. I don't understand why they don't get it. But remember, they're coming from possibly a place of fear. When you're in fear, that primal, or that reptilian brain's firing, and your frontal cortex is not really firing up, and you're not logically hearing what's being said. So you might take in a bit of the message, but you're not taking in all the message. So repeating the message in different mediums. So you might announce it in a town hall, follow it up with a fact sheet and FAQs by email, and then you might put something in a weekly newsletter. Keep reinforcing key messages in your meetings and in your one-on-ones with your staff. Consistency is really important. As soon as there's a whiff of, but you told somebody else something different, the trust is broken, and that really impacts effectiveness of change. So really consistent messages in different mediums over and over again, and just buying into that as a leader, and just knowing that that's what's needed to lead people through change. It's just what they need. They need to hear it over again to get it. And there'll be very few people who'll say to you, "Oh, will you stop saying that?" I just don't think I've ever heard that. So just trust that you probably need to just keep repeating the message in different ways over and again.
Right. And don't you find that helps people to feel connected, like they're part of it when they know about it? Because I know like years ago at my beginning times in the government, when I was lower down, they wouldn't tell you a thing about why we were doing anything we were doing, or why we were doing things like we were. It was just like, here, take this and implement it. And that was really hard to do and to implement with staff, because nobody felt like they were part of it. Like they were getting used like chess pieces, sort of. In a way.
Yeah, well, we don't like being just told what to do we? I think any of us
we do not.
So even toddlers don't like being told what to do. So, we're dealing with adults, self-directed adults here at work. So we do need to have the reason why. We do need to feel involved. I 100% agree. So the more that you can engage with people and hear their perspective, the better the change will be. And, the other thing is too, it's similar to that whole concept of diversity, isn't it? If I'm the one with all the answers, then I'm going to not realize what my blind spots are. I'm going to be very tunnel vision, and we're going to get the same solution over and again. Whereas if I can bring other minds and other perspectives into the problem, then we're going to road test it, and we're going to come out with something that's much better. And look, I might think I know everything that happens in my team, but I guarantee that I'm not the person at the coalface doing it. There's bits that I just don't know. And those little pieces might be really important pieces of the puzzle in terms of having an effective change with clients.
Yeah. And if we're going to do business differently going ahead, which I believe we have to, we're not going to get ahead with old ways now. We really, why have a team if you want them all to think like you? There's no point. And so when we have those teams, really utilizing them to their potential and drawing things out of them that they maybe weren't comfortable before to share, so that when stuff does happen, they're going to feel comfortable speaking up and saying, "Oh, wow, I see this possibility." I've seen the best things come out of people who, as soon as they start to share, they're sharing genius things with seeing things a great way. But when they feel like they can't contribute or say anything because they'll be shot down, they're not going to do a thing.
That's right. It's that whole psychological safety thing. People aren't going to speak up if they feel like they're going to be just ignored or criticized or ridiculed. So creating a safe space is really important. And look, one tool, I suppose, that I use to do that with teams, with leaders and their teams, is we often get together when change is coming. So we know about the change. There's often a little bit of fear about the change. We'll get together and we'll develop a team change charter. You've probably heard of team charters before, and it's really that same idea of how are we going to do this? How are we going to show up as a team for each other and for our leader and for the organisation to get through this? Because change requires people to step up a little bit, right? It's not your comfort zone, obviously. That's the obvious thing. We're getting people out of the comfort zone. Some people react badly, not so well to that. And we need to remind people that being open-minded, being empathetic, listening to understand, being respectful in your communication, those sorts of things that would be in a code of conduct or all those sort of things are very, very important to recognise. And also in that process, explaining how, I use the Cotter change curve, but some sort of understanding that different people will respond differently to change. There's a process of change. If you're feeling resistance, that's okay, because, you're going to get through the curve and come out the other side. But different people will take different amounts of time to get through that. And having the whole team understand that, asking them to support each other through change, not judge if someone's taking time, or isn't ready or is upset by change, whereas you're, hey, what's the problem? Let's do it. It's okay. And just making that safe space and encouraging the team to really work together to support each other through it. I find that really helpful. But the other thing is, well, it's helpful because they design it. They're their words on that charter, not mine and not their leaders. Like, you're going to do this. This is how we're going to do it. But the other good thing is that the leaders can then manage to that. That change charter becomes something that they can say, hey, look, Natalie, I saw how you spoke to Kathy. I know you're a bit stressed, but that's not really in line with how we agreed that we do things. Do you need some help, or is there something that we need to do? It gives you the opportunity to hold people to account to their standards that they set, and offer support and guidance and coaching, in the moment when it's most needed.
Right. I think one of the big disconnects happens between leaders and teams when we have expectations instead of agreements. And the way you're talking about this, it's like, oh, well, wait, everybody agreed to this. And people like to hold their agreements too. They don't like to break their agreement. So it's so much easier to bring them back into the fold when they've agreed to it up front. So it makes any kind of what could be looked at as like confrontation, it's not confrontation. It's just a much simpler process. So.
Yeah, that's right. And it's working with what they've asked you to work with. But, careful what you wish for. They're going to hold you to account to those behaviours in the donut charter as well. So your behaviour has to be, role modelling what it is that the team has asked in terms of support. But it's really great to hear from them what they expect of each other and of you, I suppose, as a leader.
Yeah.
And to have that really clearly laid out, because it gives you some guidelines. If you've not done change before, then just having that that discussion with your team and coming up with a list of behaviours is really useful.
Yeah. And I think actually, like, when change happens, you don't see it, and many people may not feel it as they're going through it, but I think it can bring those teams much closer. It's kind of like they have an outside enemy. It's not an outside enemy, but it's kind of like them staying together on it really builds that bond in a time of a force outside of them that they're dealing with.
Yeah, the bond, I think, is based on trust. If you've been able to get through that and you've had each other's back and you've come out the other side, then trust is built. It's stronger. And so those bonds of trust are really important to build through change. And obviously, as a leader, that constant communication is how you build trust, and admitting that you don't know the answer to some things, that you can't 100% foresee what it's going to look like in black and white. It's a bit grey and fuzzy. It's okay to admit that you don't know everything, because I think that makes you human and people can trust you then, rather than thinking you've got to have all the answers, saying something and then having to turn around later and say, oh, actually, I'm sorry, I think I led you down the wrong path. Which might happen sometimes.
That
but
happens
just,
sometimes.
if you know, you don't. Yeah, if you know you don't know, just say so.
Yeah. What do you see as the future of having that? You work with bureaucracies, you work with corporations, you work with nonprofits. Do you think in the next few years that the organizational structures of all of them, like including the bureaucracies, do you think they're going to look the same, or are they going to flatten out? Like, what do you see would be a great way for the world to move and shift to make these things work better?
I think I don't think there's an easy answer to that question, because I think it depends on the size of the organisation, what it's there to do. So if you've got a massive organisation, then some hierarchy is needed, but again, I agree that some flatter structures is a good idea. If you've got a smaller organisation, then reducing the layers of hierarchy will just help things to get delivered faster, get decisions made faster, and be more agile. So I think that is the way to go. But there depending if you've got a large organization, it will have more layers. And I think that's unavoidable, really.
Right. Okay. And what do you see are the changes that people may struggle with, companies might struggle with, leaders might be struggling with in terms of AI?
I think it's because we don't really know. We still don't know so much. And I think that's why people are struggling with it. There's some great, efficiencies that are being made with AI. There's a lot of automation that people are bringing in already. And I think that's great. But some people have concerns about that, worried about, well, if it's automated, am I still going to have a job? So that's the sort of thing I'm seeing right now. And in most cases, almost all cases, they're still going to have a job, but the nature of their work will be different. All that knowledge that they bring, I think rather than being a doer, they're a knowledge base now. People are really going to be valued more for what they know rather than, the manual tasks that they might have been doing in the past, even in, bureaucracies and administrative kind of organizations, not manufacturing plants and things like that. So, for example, there's a team I'm working with at the moment, at records management, and there's just so many automations that you can make to get things filed properly and not have to have someone doing that, not having to worry about paper anymore. I don't know, we've been on that mission for a long time, but some organizations are a little bit lagging in that. But just automating a lot of that will make everyone's life a lot easier. And it doesn't remove the jobs. It just means that the people who were there, now the nature of their work changes. That creates some fear.
Right. Yeah, I see the same thing. I see people with fear that it will replace humans. And like you said, I think it's going to do, I'm embracing the automation and going, wow, this is great. It can do certain things, but it's not human. And there's going to be those jobs, and those, like you said, they'll shift. What people do is going to shift, but maybe it will free people up to do more of that creativity. AI doesn't has zero creativity in it, built in, but the human mind does. So
yeah, exactly. So it's about the creativity, but also being able to really provide service. I just don't know at the moment that AI can provide service the way that a human can. And so that focus on, capturing knowledge, really leveraging what people know, honing up their customer service skills and their people skills and their, emotional intelligence, those sorts of skills are going to be really important, as well as digital capability going into the future.
Right. Well, there's things now. I typed on something the other day and it said, well, here's your virtual assistant to help you with this. I am 100% certain it was not a human, because the answers that would come out of it, I'm like, that's not a real person. Like it looked so much like it. It was a bit scary because I kept staring at it and I'm like, I want to see what kind of words it gives me. And it came out with stuff and I went, no, this is AI. So then I was like playing with it to see if I could get it to do things. I'm like, okay, it was an AI thing. So like you said, the customer service was not there that a human could provide, for sure.
Yeah, they can't empathize like we can. You can program empathy in, but I just don't think they can empathize like we can. So definitely. And look, I was playing with ChatGPT, just the other day and chucking a few things in to see what it gives me. And it is great. There's a lot of time-saving efficiency there, but it's very mechanistic, it really wasn't written like a human would. Every day, you wouldn't send that same structure of a message every single day, things like that. So I think it's still got a way to go.
It's kind of funny because I was reading something that talked about how people were concerned because that AI program is picking up people's judgments. So we're going to have those unconscious judgments coming in, but yet when you see what comes out of it, there's no feeling. So it's like, wow, we got the judgments without even the feeling. Like that's worse.
That's right. So look, I think there's always going to be a place for people. I know that there'll be significant change over time because of the automation and AI, but it just means that we have to adapt, and we've been doing that forever. So the work doesn't look the way it did in the Industrial Revolution, thank goodness. So we've been changing. And we've been adapting to new technologies. And I think that's one of our strengths as human beings. So it's just about supporting each other well through it, really.
What do you see as a catalyst that gets people to look at new possibilities? Like there's the change that comes down from somewhere else in your organization, and then there's a change that's initiated by your team. Like how would you spark that in your people to, anytime they see a problem, try to come up with a possibility and a potential solution before they bring the problem forward? How would you initiate that?
Yeah, well, I have probably a fairly big picture approach to that, in that I encourage leaders and their teams to have regular, for example, annually, to really sit down and look at what they do, that strategic kind of planning days. What are we here? What is our purpose? What difference are we trying to make in the world? And each year that's going to incrementally change. It's going to be influenced by the world, by the expectations of clients, by restrictions and resources that are available or not available, by supporting there's lots of things that will influence that every year. But if you keep striving and stretching and thinking, look, if we were working at our award-winning best, what would we be doing differently than what we're doing now? And how would that make a difference to our clients or our service or our profit or whatever? How can we then now start to work towards that? So I guess every year, taking that time out to really vision what you do, rather than just say, hey, it ain't broke, don't fix, if it's not broke, don't play with it, which I agree with in some sense, but you've got to be continuously improving, and the world is changing around you. So you can't just keep doing that same old thing forever and expect it's going to work. So engaging a team in those discussions and helping them to sort of decide on what they think would be best, and tapping into their knowledge and their expertise to come up with that, then they're motivated to go, right, okay, well, if we keep having this problem, we've got to find a way to resolve it. Or if we want to become this sort of organisation, then we've got to start changing our values or our mindset or our decisions around certain things, or we've got to look for different suppliers or whatever. But you've got a plan. You've almost got a plan from that discussion. So that's a very big picture response, but I think that's a really great way to think about it, even for smaller things. But I agree with you 100%. We really need to have teams that feel free to speak up, especially when there's been repetitive problems, but being engaged in trying to, launch the team to success, rather than just accept that those problems are, nothing that they can do anything about. So come up with a solution, even if it's not right. It might be the embryo of, a great idea. So
yeah,
definitely,
because that opens it up to where people are looking that direction. Like you're still going, you've got that target set, but you're opening it up saying, well, could we do this a little better? Or could we do that? Because I think that in the world, I think we have solutions to every problem out there, but the people who are getting those solution ideas are not bringing them forward. Like they're holding back, and they're not saying, wow, well, what about this? Because sometimes it's a really different idea. But I love the way you said that you set the annual target, and so they know the big picture of where they're going, which is key. And then giving them that freedom. And I think stuff like that just takes a few people speaking up, it being encouraged more. And you see that, oh, they didn't get in trouble for bringing this idea forward. And so it's okay for me to do it too. And I think
absolutely. Yeah, and look, there's a lot of research around high-performing teams and the skills that support high performance in a team member. And one of the 5 that Dr. Michael Bernard is one that I have researched a lot. He's from here in Australia, University of Melbourne, and he's one of the 5 skills that a great team member has in a high-performing team is that willingness to speak up confidently about their ideas, even if they might be unpopular or might be quite radical, but having the confidence to speak up. But then another skill is being able to work well together. So the other people who are hearing that, responding well to that, and coming with their own ideas, being confident to speak up and say, well, Kathy, that sounds great in theory, but I'm worried about this, but not making it the person that's
Right.
silly or, but the actual idea and being willing to brainstorm and leverage from it rather than just criticize it and judge it.
And what are the other three?
They are self-management, they are organization. So self-management, being resilient, not blowing up or crying or whatever, organization, persistence. So not finishing until it's done. High performing teams just keep going, even if it's boring or frustrating or whatever. They organize themselves and their energy to deliver on that. Of course, then speaking up and getting along with others. They're the 5.
Excellent. And you have them go through, right? Something's echoing.
I have them go through what? Sorry?
I'm sorry. My voice thing is echoing. I'm sorry if you're listening. It just bleeped out. You have them, you work with them on all 5, right? Of the
Yes.
leaders. Okay.
Yeah. So what I encourage leaders to do is to talk to their teams. Well, first of all, recruit people with those skills. If you've inherited a team, then you work with them to develop those skills, and both collectively and individually. That might mean some training or development or coaching for the individuals, and really reward and recognize when they're using those and tapping into those skills together, because that is a high performing team should be able to work fairly effectively without you there every day. I mean, wouldn't that be lovely? But you set the direction, you create the environment, you recognize and reward and coach when needed. But you shouldn't be fighting fires all the time. If they're high performing, they should be able to do that themselves and work together to do that. And they should feel confident, as you say, to come to you with solutions to trends that they've noticed, to repeating problems, or to just great ideas that they've seen somewhere else in the market. So that's the sort of skills we're trying to foster in high-performing teams. And let's face it, change is a good time to work on that, because everyone's already a little bit unstable. So now's a good time to say, okay, we've got our team charter. That's usually all about speaking up, getting along, those sides of those particular skills. Then you can work on some of the others, like being organised and self-management and things like that.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about your gift that you have for people and how they can get a hold of you. Everything will be in Natalie's speaker page, so make sure you go in there and check out her free gift. You're going to want to take that home with you to help you in your leadership. So give us that along with some parting words.
Okay. All right. Well, the free gift is very simple. I guess I'm not sure of the people who are attending the summit, how many of you have had any formal training in change management. And so it's a simple 1-page quick reference guide for leaders leading others through change. It covers off on things like what makes change succeed and fail. So when you're planning, some of the things to keep in mind. It gives you a 3-stage model for staying active and engaged in change as a leader. It talks about how to overcome resistance and also how to get commitment from others. So it's just some tips and tricks to keep you focused. I'd encourage you to just print it out and have it with you as you're planning and as you're going through change, checking in with it every now and then and just seeing how you're going, using it as your own kind of reflective tool. How to get in touch with me? Well, there'll be some information on the document that you download, but also you can find me on Facebook or LinkedIn. I do have a Twitter account. I don't use it a lot, and a website. All those details will be in the speaker notes.
Okay, what a handy gift. I love that. That's going to help everybody through every change. So
I hope so. That's the intent.
Yeah, thank you for bringing it. And in 1 page, you don't have to do like 10 books to get it. That's huge. So thank you for sharing that. Thank you, Natalie, for being here and sharing your genius with everyone. Thank you to all of you who are listening for being here with us and for being great guests and listening to Natalie. Take what she's giving you today, put it into action, practice it, and you will get some great success. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you. And if anybody is looking for a coach or just wants to bounce off me for anything that they might be struggling with, then feel free to reach out and get in touch. I'd be happy to help.
All right. You've got her information. Check it out.
Thanks, Kathy. Bye.